JAMB candidates, welcome to the second half of our biology lecture for preparation of JAMB UTME 2026 and beyond. And today, the topic we are continuing with is reproduction. And what do you understand by this word here in green, reproduction? Reproduction is simple. Procreation, making of new organism, making of new organism by newer species. Okay, so and when the process whereby an organism make their kind. Okay, that's reproduction. As easy as that. The simplest definition of reproduction is the process whereby living organisms make their kind, okay, or develop their kind, their species, their kind. So lion no go born goat. That make they say lion no they born goat. All right. So there are various types of reproduction, but those various types of reproduction, they are classified under two classifications. Okay, two categories. The first classification of reproduction is asexual reproduction. The second classification of reproduction is sexual reproduction. So reproduction can either be sexual or asexual. So when you hear the word asexual, anytime you see a before any word, a normal word, you can still see another form where you can't get a before the word. That means that it is against or not involving that word. That word a there means not involving, against. All right. So when you say, first of all, we have to understand the meaning of sexual before we talk about asexual. Sexual means that there is transfer of gametes. There is transfer of reproductive material, okay, from male to female, okay, so that's sexual. But when you have this a here, asexual, it means that it is against transfer of gametes. It is against transfer of reproductive material, from one organism to the other. All right, so there's no transfer of gametes. There's no transfer of reproductive materials such as egg and sperm. All right, so we are looking at asexual reproduction. I just defined asexual reproduction for you. So the production of offspring from a single parent without the fusion of gametes. So it does not involve the fusion of gametes, no exchange of gametes. Okay, no fusion. There is no fusion whereby this one bring, come together. There is no fusion of gametes, no fuse. Okay, gametes no diffuse. Now, looking at the table we have here, the heading of the table says the type of asexual reproduction. Under the table, we have types. That's what you are seeing here. Example, and how it works, what it's all about. All right. Under the left side of the table, we have the types. All the types, let me quickly list them: binary fission, budding, natural vegetative propagation, and artificial vegetative propagation. What do you understand by the word propagation? Propagation means multiplication. Multiplication, reproduction, that is propagation for you. So we have two types of propagation. We have vegetative propagation, that's the one done by plants naturally. Okay, then you have artificial propagation, whereby you have to cut the tissue from plants, okay, and go and facilitate the multiplication of such species. Now we are looking at asexual reproductions. The type of asexual reproductions, we already listed them. They are outlined on the left side of this table. And under binary fission, example of binary fission, we have paramecium. Paramecium undergoes what? Binary fission. Not only paramecium, you also have amoeba, okay, or amoeba undergoes what? Binary fission. All right, and binary fission is a type of what? Asexual reproduction, not involving the fusion of what? Gametes, not involving what? The fusion of what? Gametes. All right. So, and how does this binary fission work? Remember, we have two types of something related to binary. We have binary fusion and we have fission. This one we are discussing here is binary fission. Fission. All right, so it involves the splitting into two daughters. Okay, after DNA replication, the cell splits into two daughters. We are going to look at the diagram. Okay, it splits into two daughters after DNA replication. Two daughters after DNA replication. Are those two daughters identical? Yes. Two identical daughter cells, okay, are given off, okay, from what? From binary fission. The next here under is budding, okay, and under budding, it is the organism that mostly, carry out this budding is yeast, all right, yeast, you have yeast, all right, and you can also find budding in plantain, all right, you also find budding in plantain and banana, where you have their young, okay, it's an outgrowth, their young is just there as an outgrowth, okay, so budding is all about a small outgrowth bud develops into a new individual. So that bud develops into a new individual or a new organism. Okay, that's how they reproduce. They will stay small. One part of their body will start to develop. They are younger one will grow from there. Younger yeast or hydra. Hydra is also an organism that reproduce through budding. Okay, start growing from there and it falls off, and that one continues or starts surviving or starts existing as a new hydra or as a new organism or as a new plantain or as a new yeast and so on and so forth. The next we have here is natural vegetative propagation. And the natural vegetative propagation, the plants, the organisms that undergo this natural vegetative propagation is what? Is the runners, such as they are known as runners, such as strawberry plants. Okay, you also have the tubers, classified as tubers, such as potato. Okay, then you have the bulbs, such as onions, rhizomes, all the rhizomes. Okay, the rhizome family, such as ginger. Okay, and so on and so forth. So these are the organisms that undergo natural vegetative propagation. So there are different types of propagation in plants. Different types of propagation. When you hear propagation, just know we are talking about plants. There are majorly two types of propagation in plants. We have sexual or seed propagation, which is not an asexual reproduction, because we are dealing with asexual reproduction here. Then we have asexual or vegetative propagation. So we are dealing with what? Asexual propagation. That's why you are seeing vegetative here, natural and artificial what? Vegetative propagation. All right. What is natural vegetative propagation all about? It's a specialized horizontal stem that produces new plants. A specialized what? Horizontal stem, okay, that produce what? New plants, okay. It occurs naturally. You start seeing it starts sprouting from the side, okay. The stem forms what? A new plant, a horizontal stem. All right. So you can see the plants that undergoes natural what? Vegetative propagation. The next here and the final here that JAMB said we should get accustomed to is the artificial vegetative propagation. And the artificial vegetative propagation is what? It involves processes such as cutting of parts of the plant, layering of that part you have cut from a plant, then grafting. Grafting is you cut one particular part of a plant and you go and transplant it somewhere else, okay? And also tissue culture. All these are artificial vegetative propagation, okay? And how is it done? Like I said, it's just through this process. The parts of plant are cut, layered, or graft. I said you cut one part and you transplant it into another part, okay? That's what grafting of plant. And also tissue culture. All these are what? Artificial, method of vegetative propagation. All right. This is the diagram showing the list of asexual reproduction that we just discussed. All right. So the first there is binary fission. You can see the cell that it is dividing, okay? Dividing. What is left for this cell now is cytokinesis, okay? Whereby the cells, okay, the cytoplasm of the cell break, okay? It breaks. So what is left for this cell is cytokinesis. All right. Cytokinesis. That's what is left for this cell to occur, whereby the cell completely divides. All right. The cell completely what? Divides, involving what? The cytoplasm of the cell, okay? So it divides towards two daughter cells, which are what? Identical, all right? The next here is budding, and you can see what we have here on budding. Budding is an outgrowth, a little outgrowth that eventually what? Turns into what? A new organism, all right? That's budding. You can see where it fell off, okay? From the hydra. This is the hydra. Another one is fragmentation. We just included it here. Fragmentation is also it is an asexual reproduction, okay? Organisms that undergo fragmentation are organisms like planaria, and you also have spirogyra too, okay? They undergo fragmentation. What is fragmentation all about? The parts of the organism just break off, and that part that breaks off starts existing as a new organism. That's fragmentation. You can see the planaria breaking off, okay? And as it breaks off, all those parts that has broken off, they turn to a new planaria one. All right, that's that for that. The next here is regeneration. Normally, the organism that normally undergo reproduction is the echinodermata, okay? Starfish, all right? Starfish, they regenerate, okay? Regeneration of a new organism from the old organism, all right? The next we have here is spore formation, okay? Those organisms that form spore, such as you have the rhizobium. Rhizobiums have an adaptive structure called mycelium or sporangia that they use in producing spore, and it's through that spore that they reproduce, okay? It's through that spore that they reproduce. Also mushroom too. You can see mushroom also produce spore. So this is mushroom, all right? So the final we have here is vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation, it involves what? Cutting of the plant. Remember, we have natural artificial. You can see that this is part of the plant, an organ of the plant, a branch is cut off, okay, and sown, okay, into earth or into soil, okay, and that plant eventually grows and turns to a what? A parent plant or a new plant, all right? That's that for that, for asexual reproduction. Now, let's look at sexual reproduction in flowering plants. This sexual reproduction, we have sexual reproduction in plants and in animal, okay, but we are looking at this sexual reproduction in flowering plants, okay? Unlike asexual reproduction, sexual reproduction is about the transfer of gametes, okay? There is a transfer and a fusion of gametes from one organism to another, okay? From opposite organism, from male and female, There is transfer, okay, and fusion of gametes, all right? So sexual reproduction in flowering plants, first of all, we have to understand the floral parts of flowering plants before we understand the sexual reproduction in flowering plants, all right? Because if we don't know the parts of flowering plants, how then do we understand the sexual reproduction of flowering plants? Now let's look at the floral parts and the functions of those floral parts in flowering plants, all right? On the left side of the table contains the parts, okay, the floral parts, while on the right side of this table, you can see on your screen, contains the function of that particular floral parts, all right? The first we have here is the sepal, and sepal is also known as calyx, okay? And sepal, what is the function? It protects the flower bud, okay? It protects what? The flower bud. The second we have here is the petal, and the petal is also called corolla, all right? And what does the corolla do? What's its function? It attracts pollination. It attracts pollinators. It has a flamboyant appearance, okay? I don't know if you've heard of petaloid. Petaloid is brightly colored petals, okay, that attract pollinators, attract them because they are flamboyant, they are colorful, and they have good scents, okay. Pollinators seem to be attracted to them, okay. Pollinator goes there towards to feed or for there, and during the process they pollinate the flower. All right, so that's for petal. Petal is also called what? Corolla. I know you know that car called Corolla. So that car was named after petal because petal is a flamboyant, is a colorful, is a beautiful part of flower. All right. The next we have here under the part is the stamen, and the stamens is known as the male part of the flower, the male part. Just like in animals that you have male, you still have male and female in plants, opposite sex in plants, or opposite sexes in plants. All right. And this stamen that is called the male part of the flower, it contains what is called the anther and the filaments. Okay, the anther and the filaments, that helps to it provides support to the anther. All right. So you can also call this stamen anther. All right. That's why some textbook will define pollination as the transfer of pollen grain from the anther to the stigma of a flower. Okay, from the anther of a flower to the stigma of a flower, or from the anther of another flower to the stigma of another flower. All right, from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower, depending if it's a cross pollination or if it's a self pollination. All right. So what is the function of these stamens? Okay, the function of the stamens is to protect and release pollens. That's the function. It is that pollen grain that is the male, sexual reproductive material. Okay, so that pollen grain, that's the male gametophyte. All right, the male gametes, that's that pollen grain. So its function is to produce that pollen grain, or to release. After production, it releases the pollen grain. The next we have here is the carpel. The carpel is the female part of the flower, and the carpel comprises of, or the carpel is made up of the stigma. It contains the stigma, it contains the style, and it contains the ovary. The carpel contains what? The stigma, it contains what? The style, and it contains the ovary. You can also choose to be calling it carpel, but I like calling it carpel. All right. So what is the function of this female part called carpel? Okay. The function of this female part called carpel is to receive pollen from the male part called stamen. All right. You receive this pollen, which is the male gamete, and it enters the stigma of the carpel, and it fertilizes the ovus or ova in the carpel. And pollination occurs. Okay, the fertilization process is completed. Okay, it contains what? The female gamete. All right, because it is inside that, the ovary in the stigma. That is where you find the what is it called? That's where you find the ova. Okay, and there must be a contact between the male gamete and the female gamete for fertilization to occur. All right, so there must be a way to ensure that it enters. So for your assignment, search for dinoecium and tell me what dinoecium is in the comment section. That dinoecium is commonly repeated every year in JAMB UTME. So find the meaning of dinoecium. Dinoecium is related to this concept, floral part of flower. It's a collective name for a particular part of the flower, but I can't really remember it at this moment. Okay, at this time I can't. My brain is failing me. So it's a collective name for something here, but I don't know the particular thing that it is. All right. So for us to be sure, go and research it. All right. The final we have here is the receptacle. And receptacle, what does the receptacle contain? The receptacle bear all the floral organs. The receptacle, it holds. It will be like this. It will be like a bow. It carry all other floral parts of the flower. That's its function. All right. The receptacle is always located below everything. 9 day under. 9 they carry everything. If you bring garden egg, for example, that thing you have under that garden egg, close to the place you hold that garden egg, is called the receptacle. All right. That's called what? The receptacle. It holds it. All right. Now, this is a diagram containing all floral parts of a flower. All right. These are all the floral parts. You can see the petal, which is for pollination. You can see where it's located. It's brightly colored, so it attracts pollinators to this pollen tube, because this is the site. Okay, this pollen tube takes the pollen grain down into this place called the ovary, and inside this ovary is where you have the ovule or the ova of the female. All right, so you can see this up here is called the stigma. Okay, you can see that the stigma, the style, and the pollen tube, they are all parts of the carpel. All right, they are all part of the carpel, which is the female reproductive. Look at it, the female reproductive part. All right, of the flower. So you can see the receptacle below. It carries, it carries every other floral part. All right. So this is the stem of the plant, and this is the sepal. Okay, this is the sepal. What does the sepal do? It's located just adjacent or surrounding, very close alongside the receptacle. The sepal does what? It protects the flower. That's the function of the sepal. And you also have the anther. This one is a plant that is hermaphrodite. Okay, both the male and the female, has both the male and the female organ. Okay, so this one is anther, and this one is stamen. This particular tube here is stamen. Okay, the stamen is the male part of the flower, and this is the anther. This is where you have the pollen grain. This anther here, okay, like orange stick. So this is where you have the pollen grain, and the pollen grain, when pollinators, when they come here, because of the petal is attractive, they come here and they feed from this pollen grain, and as a result, some of the pollen grain sticks to their mouth or whatever parts, or their feet, depending on the parts of their body that comes in contact with the anther. Okay, as soon as they go up, approaching the petal or the petaloid, where it's more colorful, because they have to go there, and the pollen tube has better scents and contains, nectar. All right, when they go there to suck nectar, they some of the pollen grains on them dislodge and falls into this pollen tube. Okay, and during that process, it travels down the pollen tube, and it fuses with the ovule or the ova inside the ovary, and pollination is completed, which further leads to fertilization. Let's understand pollination and fertilization in plants. All right, so pollination, what is pollination? In layman terms, in the simplest form or the simplest definition you can get for pollination is the transfer of pollen or pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. We already discussed what anther is and what stigma is. All right, and under pollination, we have two types of pollination. We have the self-pollination and cross-pollination. Under self-pollination, what occurs in self-pollination? What transpires during self-pollination? Pollen grain from same flower. That's the fact of self-pollination. Pollen grain is transferred from the anther of the same flower to the stigma of the same flower. So it occurs in one plant. Okay, that's for self-pollination. It occurs in one plant. Only one plant or one crop is involved. All right, for self-pollination. So there is usually a low genetic variation. That's the offspring is slightly different, okay, from the parent plant. All right, so the variation not too much. Okay, they get like a new breed that is going to be highly distinct from the parents. All right, so that's one of the advantage of self-pollination. If you want to continue having the same breed of plant, you continue self-pollination. All right, therefore cross-pollination, which is the opposite of self-pollination, it involves the transfer of pollen, okay, from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower. Okay, this is between two different flowers, all right, or two different plants. Okay, so self-pollination, one plant, one plant. Cross-pollination from one place to another, from one plant to another, from the anther of one plant to the stigma of another plant, from the stamen of one plant to the carpet of another, and so on and so forth. So cross-pollination usually produce an offspring with diverse genetic copy. All right, they produce offspring with diverse genetic copies. All right, so you are going to see offspring highly distinct from the parents. Okay, you are going to observe significant difference between the offspring and the parent plant, because something was taken from the foreign, something was taken from another place. You understand? To complete the fertilization process, the plant was cross-pollinated from another person. It's just like when a man meets a different woman, so you are going to have a new offspring with a new genetic material. Okay, other than when a hermaphrodite, you understand? Other than when a hermaphrodite just do their fertilization thing, and budding, how budding they be now, budding, for example, which is an asexual reproduction. Okay, so during budding, when the plant begins to bud, or when the organism begin to bud, okay, and produce their young from an outgrowth. All right, the offspring is usually not too different from the parents. Okay, you are not going to observe any significant difference between the offspring and the parents. Let's look at the advantages of cross-pollination. What are the advantages of cross-pollination? Increased genetic variation, which gives better adaptation. I hope you know the benefits of interbreeding other than intrabreeding. The advantage of interbreeding over intrabreeding. All right, so when you now make they allow good, say if you want to marry, you go marry your family member. So produce stronger and more healthy new organisms. That's why they interbreed. Okay, if you want to get married now, you go and get married from another family, another village, another state, another country. Okay, it's going to help in the production, or it's going to facilitate the production of a stronger and healthier offsprings. Okay, so the offsprings from interbreeding is usually healthier and stronger than those from intrabreeding. All right, so better adaptation. Okay, so when there is genetic variation, there is a better adaptation. When you bring your own, I bring my own, we put them together, it will make sense. It becomes better. You bring your idea, I bring my idea, we put them together. It becomes better, other than me using my own idea. You understand that? You understand that concept I'm trying to put across. All right. So the next advantage of cross-pollination is it reduces inbreeding depression. That's inbreeding depression of adaptation through inbreeding. It reduces it. Okay. Cross-pollination may produce larger, more vigorous seed. Cross-pollination may produce larger, more vigorous seed. Because why? Because cross-linkage usually lead to the production of a more robust and a more adaptive species, or a more adaptive organism. Let's understand the fertilization process that occurs after pollination. When pollen grains germinate, pollen tube grows down the style. Okay, that style is straight. Pollen tube will grow down, reach where the ovule. So the male gamete, which is sperm, fuses with female gamete, which is egg, in ovule. Okay, and zygote is formed. Okay, and after the zygote is formed, embryo is formed, and that embryo is called what? It's known as the seed. Okay, the embryo is known as seed. That's the process of fertilization. So you can see that it is pollination that induces fertilization in plants. What are the products of sexual reproduction? The product of sexual reproduction in plants include seed. A seed is formed. A seed contains embryo. Okay, it also contains endosperm that stores food in the seed. Okay, it is that food, that starch stored in that seed that the seed uses to germinate. Okay, at the primitive stage, at the young stage of the development of the organism or the plant, it is this endosperm, that the food stored in this endosperm, that provide nutrients for before the plant is ready to start photosynthesizing. So this starch, okay, or food stored in the endosperm produces what? Energy, okay, for germination before the plant starts sprouting leaf and is ready to photosynthesize to make its own food. Also, it is through this endosperm for us that are heterotroph that feeds on seeds. You know, we they chop seed like beans, all those ones are seed now. So that food where we say store for the endosperm, now we they chop, now we they enjoy, now we they eat. So it's also a source of nutrition to other organisms. The seed also contains something called a seed coat, okay, which is known as the tester. The tester does what? The tester protects the what? The embryo. The tester does what? It protects the embryo. The tester is the outer coverage of the seed, protecting the embryo that's inside the seed. Another product from the sexual reproduction in plants is the fruit. And what is fruit? The fruit is a mature ovary. A mature ovary that protects seed and what? That aids in dispersal. The fruit does what? It's a mature ovary that protects. It's around the seed. Okay? You know what the fruit contains now? The fruit contains different parts such as the mesocarp, the epicarp, and the pericarp. Okay? In some fruits, the mesocarp is edible. For example, a fruit like mango, the mesocarp is edible. All right. You have the epicarp, you have the pericarp, you have the endocarp, you have the mesocarp. The mesocarp is what's edible in mango. But in fruits like coconuts, it has a fibrous what? It has a fibrous mesocarp. So the mesocarp is not edible. That place where they pick come off of coconuts. Now that place be the what? Be the mesocarp. So the part that is edible in the coconut is the endocarp. That's where it's what edible in a coconut. So it all depends on the particular fruit. Alright, so the fruit is a mature ovary that protects the seed and aids in dispersal. What is dispersal? The spread of the fruit, okay, or the spread of the seed. As you are spreading the fruit, you are spreading the seed. Okay, let me give you an example. When squirrel carry fruits, they chop, you chop, you go carry the kernel, go another place. Or when rabbits carry kernel, okay, you go a hole, go drop them. You go carry kernel from far place, go a hole, go drop them. That's how it go spread from there. That place where that rabbit drop that kernel, go germinate, start to grow. If you grow to a large tree again, palm tree, bird go from there, carry kernel, or they chop kernel go for another rabbit go pick again, carry go another far place. That's how the plant continues to spread through what? Seed dispersal. Another one is through bird. Another one is man. Man also disperse seed through fruit. You pluck mango, you chop, finish, you chop the mango finish, you lick until the mango seed done white. Are you not ashamed of yourself? Mango seed white finish. You wash the mango seed with your lip and your tongue. You use and wash the mango seed finish. Mango seed done the white. And as man, now what you will come do as you don't finish this one, the mango seed now waste shade, you will come stone and throw away. So that process where you take throw away the mango seed is dispersal. You are multiplying, you are spreading, you are disseminating the seed. Okay, because that place where you throw and go, it go germinate for there. Another mango go grow for there. Another person go still pluck for there, leak again, you go carry and travel. You self, you carry the mango travel. If you travel, you leak and finish, you throw one for there, you start to grow for there. That's the word, the multiplication, the spreading of plants through the word seed dispersal. Succulent fruits. What are succulent fruits? Succulent means that something is soft and what? Filled with water. Succulent means something is soft and is filled with water. So we are trying to say a fruit that is full of what? Water. Succulent fruits are fleshy fruits like mango, pawpaw, fleshy fruits, apple. They arise mainly from what? Azo or what? Parental placentation, such as orange and mango and so on and so forth. If you are asked a question on that placentation, maybe you are asked, placentation is found in what fruits or in what plants? Okay? You just have to think. It's easy. It's very easy. So you can use this as a guide. If the fruit is succulent, if the fruit has a fleshy mesocarp, such as mango, and so on and so forth, just know that the placentation types will fall between azo and what? Parental. Okay? Azo and what? Parental. That's it. Azo is for orange, while parental is for what? Mango. Alright. So, but if the plant does not have an edible mesocarp or it does not have a succulent mesocarp, just know that such placentation can either be basal, free center, and other forms of placentation. Alright. So put that into consideration. Put that inside your head. Okay. Succulent plants, edible plants, plant with edible mesocarp. It is either azo or parental. We are going to look at the types of placentation. We are going to look at the diagram right away. So this diagram here shows the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a flower. Okay. And fertilization occurs inside the ovary. Okay. The ovule contains the what? The female what? Material of reproduction. Okay. which is the what, the ova, okay, and there the sperm gets in contact. Look at the sperm travels down and it falls here, it gets in contact with the ova, and fertilization occurs. Look at the fertilization here, egg, nucleus, polar nucleus. So the egg nucleus and the sperm nucleus fuses and a zygote is formed. A zygote, endosperm nucleus, and as soon as zygote is formed, a seed is formed. And this seed, you can now plant this seed, okay, and it turns towards a new plant. That's it. That's how plants multiply. That's how reproduction occurs in plants. So a seed is a fertilized ovary formed from a zygote. Placentation and fruit time. What do you understand by what we have here? Placentation and fruit time. On the left side of this table, we have placentation. That's the types of placentation. In the middle of this table, we have the ovule attachment. While on the right side of the table, we have the typical fruit that undergoes the so form of placentation, or the particular placentation. All right. We are starting with marginal. Under the types of placentation, we have marginal, we have parietal, we have azu or asu. We have free center, we have basal. All right. So the first placentation we are discussing here is marginal. And marginal, always remember margin. It means that it's located on the margin, okay, on the margin of the seed. So the attachment of the ovule in this marginal placentation is along the ventral suture. What is ventral? Front. Along the front suture. That's where you have the placentation. We are going to look at the diagram, okay? Along the what? Ventral suture, along the front suture. So this is the diagram. You can see where you have the ovule. Look at the ovule here. You have it along what? The front suture. It dey one margin. Straight like this for margin. You have the straight margin. Always use that line when they dey your notebook. If you dey write for primary school, that year, for secondary school, that line when they dey your notebook, remember the margin. Or when you dey take exam, that place where they say don't write on this margin. They always they use there, they remember them straight. All right. This is that form of placentation, margin. All right. Now let's go back. In what fruit or plant do you find this marginal placentation? A. It is found in simple fruits, such as in pea pods. In simple fruits, such as in what? In pea pods. You know pea now? You know pea plants, don't you? I think you know it. So the next one we have, the next placentation we are looking at is the parietal. Always remember that parietal means away from the center. The middle of this my video box here that I'm pointing at. Where will be the parietal? The parietal will be the circumference, around. All right. So what is the ovule attachment? On inner ovary wall. On what? Inner ovary wall. So the inner wall of the ovary, that's where you have the attachment, round, inner. All right. So let's quickly look at the diagram, okay? So this is the what? The diagram of parietal. You can see where it's located. Inner wall of the ovule. Look at it, the inner wall. That's where you have the placenta. That's where the placenta forms. So parietal is away from the center. Always use that to remember. So the fruit that usually undergoes parietal placentation is simple fruits, okay? Simple fruits, and they include capsule of okra. So in okra, that's where you find what? Parietal placentation, whereby you have the placentation away from the center. All right. The next we have here under placentation is asu placentation. Asu placentation. And this asu placentation, the ovule is attached in the central column. Always use asu of a vehicle to remember. Asu. Where is the asu of a vehicle located? It crosses the center of the vehicle. Asu. Okay. So the center column, that's where you find it. Okay. And it's present in simple fruits, such as tomatoes. You have it in the center of tomatoes. Okay. So before we look at the diagram of asu placentation, I want you to notice something very important here. The marginal, parietal, and asu placentation are found in simple fruits. Three of them are found in what? Simple fruits. All right. So let's look at the diagram of asu placentation. This is the diagram of asu placentation. Look at it. Can you see it? It is center. Okay. Asu. Always use asu, the wheel of a vehicle. The way wheel take the day for vehicle. This and remember. All right. Let's look at free center placentation. The free center placentation, the method of attachment of the ovule is on the freestanding center column. On the freestanding center column, it's usually smaller than the asu. The one you find in the asu is usually smaller. Okay, smaller. This projection is usually smaller. We are going to look at it, and it is found in aggregate fruits, such as in strawberry. Let's look at the diagram. This is the diagram of the free center placentation. You can see how small it is. Okay, you can see how small it is in the center, in the middle there, and you can see this asu. The one for the asu, it has connection to the parietal layer that supports it. But this one, this free center, all here, nothing there. All here, all round like this, nothing there. Okay, nothing attaches it. It's just the center that attaches it. Okay, that middle that attaches it. All right. Let's look at the final placentation, which is completing the fifth, basal placentation. And in basal placentation, the ovule is attached at the base of the ovary. That's why it's called basal. It dey floor down. That's where the ovule is attached. And such placentation is seen in multiple fruits. For example, pineapple. Pineapple. Let's look at the diagram. Okay. JAMB loves certain questions from this placentation. Please learn this thing as I teach you now. Okay. You can see the diagram of the basal placentation. You can see it is attached to the base. Okay. Where is the base? This is the base. This is the base. So pineapple is attached to the base. Okay. Placentation. So that's that for sexual reproduction in plants and also placentation. So when next we come, we are going to discuss sexual reproduction in mammals. See you in the next class. JAMB